Testing. I can't seem to figure out live on TikTok as usual. Mm, okay. Let's float our video for a few seconds and minutes and see how everyone's going to settle down. So, welcome. This is another episode of Career Talks. We're going to talk about what to do when you're getting dumped with too much workload. Could be your manager, could be your teammates, could be someone who's senior in the company. You don't report to them, but they're good in bullying you to get things done. How do you manage that relationship? And how do you push back as well? If you're online, could you please give me an exclamation mark in the chat box just so I get to see our participants? All right, there you go. Finally able to see some folks. By the way, do you notice my tan from my recent trip? Went to the beach during Holy Week in Bohol. There you go. Finally seeing some people. Would appreciate if you could please type your city, your province, or your country. I'd love to call you out. And also thank you for being part of this session again. There you go. Oh, okay. I have folks here from Pangasinan, Mandaluyong, Dubai, Kuala Lumpur, Lipa, Makati, Mumbai. By the way, this is the reason why some folks are asking me, John, why aren't you speaking in the vernacular? Why aren't you speaking in Tagalog? We do have some participants who are coming outside the Philippines, and obviously they will not be able to appreciate if I speak in Tagalog. So, as much as possible, I will be speaking in English. I hope that's okay. Joshua says, I just bought your book bundle. Thank you. Salamat po. I appreciate that. Aldrin is from Wellington in New Zealand. Haven't been to New Zealand, by the way. That's something on my bucket list. Carl is from Manila. Everard, is that the name? Is from Dubai. Nakila is from Texas. Love Loves is from Baler in Aurora. Thank you very much for joining our session today. Okay, Joss from Legazpi Albay. Very good. Okay, so let's start the session. I would love to invite our participants now. Please stop. Please start typing your questions. Remember, I want you to please stick to the topic. The topic is all about what do you do if you're being unfairly dumped with a ridiculous amount of workload? Maybe you may be wondering if the workload is unfair. That could be a possible question. So please type it in. I'll give you some tips on how we can identify if it's unfair workload, or are you just complaining because you're not as hardworking as others? So I need to call that out because some people might have a very low threshold for jobs, for projects. And then they start thinking that the moment they get assignments, they think they're already being unfairly loaded. So those two things are different. Okay? So come on guys, I have a few questions now. Let me also select. I'm gonna select. So by the way, I've been checking some of our past live sessions. Sometimes I have a tendency to spend too much time on a question, and my promise to you is I will start answering questions quickly so we can get to more questions as much as possible. Okay. Um, this one's a quick question to raise, but also a very classic one. Regina from LinkedIn is asking, how do you manage workload dumped due to high group resignations? So obviously, this is mathematical. If more people resign, then most of their projects are going to be assigned to the people who are left behind. I have two things that I'd like you to discuss with your manager. Number one, while it's natural for you to absorb the leftover jobs, you also have to hold them accountable. Happy to absorb the work, happy to absorb the projects, but may I ask if possible for a timeline, when are we going to get the rehires. Is it in 3 months' time, 6 months' time, 1 year's time? It's also a way for you to find out if your manager or the company is not even planning anymore to hire additional manpower, which could be a red flag for you, because that means if this is going to be your permanent state and this company refuses to invest in hiring the manpower that they've lost, it might affect your overall quality of life. And therefore, you might want to question, is it worth pursuing being in this organization or being in this team? Okay, so that's one. Hold them accountable. Ask, when will the replacements be taken in? This is not a very demanding question. It's a fair question to ask. It's all about how you say it properly and with respect. Okay, and then number two, you have to make your manager aware of your workload. So what I usually do is I talk to my manager every Monday or every Friday of the week, and then I lay out, these are the 10 things that I need to accomplish, or these are the 10 things that I have accomplished. I need help in letter A, letter B, or letter C, or is there anything that you'd like to add? Or if you'd like to add letter A, letter B, or letter C, I need to bump down certain projects instead so I can get this job done. The reason why this is important and why this is so basic yet totally taken for granted is sometimes we often think that our managers are aware of what we're doing. Can I get an exclamation mark if you can relate to that? A lot of us think that because our managers and our bosses have visibility with their people, we think that every nook and cranny, every single thing that we do, they know exactly what we're doing. And most of the time, they don't. They're also very busy people. They also have their own deadlines. They have a general idea of what you're doing, but they're not familiar with all the details. And this will make them think that you're doing just fine. And yet you're already drowning. Okay? I hope you appreciate that. So sometimes it matters to ask them for a one on one sit down and say, hey, boss, here's what I'm doing. Here's where I need help. And here's where I think the mass resignations in the company is going to cause a lot of problems because I can't do all of them at the same time. I need your help. I want the organization to succeed. I want the projects to end on time, but I need help. And I can't do these things on my own. Okay? So I hope those two things were very helpful. Again, if you look at the pattern, it's all about speaking up. You have to speak up. You cannot be silent. You cannot assume that your manager will find this out on their own. They're not telepathic people. Sometimes you have to approach them. Remember, your boss is a very busy person. Probably she's a mother with 3 children. She has other things to do. She got bills to pay. So you're just one of the millions of things that are running in her mind. Sometimes you have to insert yourself into that clutter of attention. Okay? Another question here from Eileen. How do you manage workload, but it seems that you're not being valued and have no plans for your career growth? By the way, someone mentioned this last time to me privately. I'd like to call out folks, if you don't want your name or your photo to be visible in this Facebook Live, please make sure that you have taken it out because they will be naturally displayed uh, in this session. Yeah, and I just need to call that out because some people might be hiding or want privacy or discretion because they don't want their boss or their company to find out. So I just need to flag that, okay? But Eileen here says, how do you manage workload, but it seems that you're not being valued and the company has no plans for your career growth? Okay, so 3 things. Number one, it's good that you already acknowledge that the company must acknowledge, must recognize that there should be a career path waiting for you. That's the sign that you're in the right hands, that you're in the good company. It's a red flag that the moment the company has no plans at all, no annual appraisal meetings conducted either annually or biannually, the manager and the leadership culture do not embrace the concept of mentorship because they think that you're there to be instructed and you do things on your own, right? Or in Tagalog, bahala na kayo dyan mentality, for example. It's good that you recognize these things. So If you're telling me that you're not being valued and that there are no plans for your career growth, level one, have you talked to your manager? This is the step that usually is missed out by most folks. Have you talked to your manager? And again, I know you guys are going to say this to me, but John, if I say these things to my manager, they might call me out because they think I'm too arrogant or I'm demanding. I'm going to leave you with two things. It's either you talk to them or you keep your silence. In any case, if you're likely going to quit the company anyway because uh, you can't anymore tolerate the pain, you might as well speak up before you leave. You might as well just talk to them one last time and take the risk that even if they get mad, at least you were able to share your thoughts. So please exhaust that solution first. Talk to your manager. Sometimes our managers do not mentor us or do not give us recognition, not because they're bad people. It's because they just either forgot about it, they think you're doing fine without it, or number three, it's just not their love language. And I've said this many times, love language is when even if you gift someone a Rolex watch, they will not appreciate you for it because physical gifts is not part of their love language. Their love language could be spending more time with you for dinner or catching up with you for lunch or fetching you from point A to point B. So if that is their love language, then you have to speak and you have to express your romance, your love to them through that route. The same thing also happens for leaders. Sometimes leaders do not possess words of affirmation as their love language. They find it corny, they find it cheesy if they say things such as awesome or good job. So they will not say it, not because they're bad people, but because it's just not part of their personality. But if you say it to them and say, I feel more recognized, I feel more accomplished, I feel that I'm appreciated when the company or when you, as my boss, literally says it or gives me the right signals to know that I'm doing it right, could you please therefore tell it to me if I'm doing it right or wrong? And sometimes these small talks, these negotiations can make or break your relationship. And I've seen this. I've seen some bosses in my past careers where in the moment they were told that they just have to change their love language, they were able to adapt, especially if you have a good one. Okay? The second one I'd like to share, sometimes you have to assess, do you think that the company is not valuing you because your standards of being valued are high or are different? So you could be recognized by salary increase, better coverage of compensation or benefits. Another possibility is literally the manager verbally expresses that they like what you're doing. Look at the culture of the company. If the company does not possess some of these items, sometimes you can't blame them only because it's just not how the company expresses their recognition. They do it differently. Okay? Some people do it via money, some do it via words. And consider the fact that because they express it differently, this is how things are done in the organization. So it is culture. Now I'm going to add the third layer. If this is not your style of expressing recognition, then you might not have a good fit between you and the company. You might want to consider working in a different environment where the rewards philosophy and the recognition philosophy is aligned with yours. Okay? I hope I get to answer your question, Eileen. Okay. Ooh, now we got lots of questions. Let's see. Okay, Juelson, how do you ask your boss for a training certification, even if you are already practicing it and you have produced a project? Is the company taking advantage of your capacity and not appreciating? Okay, so I would assume you need a certification because a certification documents that you possess a specific skill, and yet you are aware that you are eligible for that documentation, right? So again, two things. Jewelson, could you please tell me in the chat box, have you already asked this from your manager? And number two, if you have, What was the reason for not giving you certification? Most of the time, the issue is budget. It could be because the certification is very expensive, right? That's number two. Number three, could you negotiate? If the company cannot give you 100%, could it be a subsidized certification instead? Okay. If the company doesn't really want, this is going to be a tough luck. It's going to be a hard situation because there's no other way for you to budge and force them to spend for your certification. It's a question now if whether the company wants to invest in their people through certification. Okay. Again, I don't want to sound like every time the solution is uh, hopeless. I don't want you to think that the solution is to quit and look for a different company. But I'm going to say this from a technical point of view, it is a trial and error. When you enter a company, some will give it to you, some will not. So you might also want to change your perspective. If you think that this company is doing good things in other departments, except for the certification, can you change your perspective in which, yes, I may not get the certification, but there are other things in the organization that are worth keeping such that it's not a proper justification for me to just leave? Okay? I hope I get to answer your question also, Juleson. Okay. Okay, this one's good. How do you negotiate that you need a raise to your boss? What if they say that the company is still recovering? Three things. Number one, never ask for a raise if you don't deserve it. And you should never give personal reasons for your increase. You cannot say, I'm about to have a new child, my wife is pregnant, or life is harder these days. You can't just say these things because when companies increase salaries, they have to do it fairly and uniformly across all the employees. Okay? If you want to have a solid reason for a salary increase, justify it via merit. I've been doing X number of people's work. You haven't replaced these people. Literally, I'm doing the job of five people. I think it's only fair that my salary is adjusted, that is commensurate to the equivalent or at least a fraction of the people that you don't want to replace. That's one. Number two, if the company doesn't really want to increase because financial reasons, the pandemic was just recently over. I think it's over now, but last year, December, you can still say that people are still in pandemic stage. When this becomes the issue of the company, try to negotiate for non-monetary adjustments. What do I mean? If they can't adjust your cash for your salary, consider asking, can I expand the coverage of my insurance to my parents or to my other loved ones? Can I request instead for allowance for clothing or for gadgets? Because usually these things are not taxed. Okay. Sometimes there are companies that allow a portion of their employees' salaries to be converted into allowances because allowances for certain tiers and certain categories don't need to be taxed. So that means your take home pay is higher as well. You can also request if the company cannot increase my salary, can I request that I am allowed to do side gigs on top of my full-time job so that I can earn money on the side. You can also negotiate that. So I do think it's a matter of being creative beyond cash. Because let's face it, guys, you can't force a company to just give you more money because you need it. And I totally understand life is getting harder these days because inflation is getting through our pockets. I mean, I live in a district where a plate of food is around 500 to 700 pesos. So, and this wasn't like this 2 or 3 years ago. So I do understand that salary increases are important, but you have to justify it. There has to be a merit behind it. Okay. Okay. Michael from Facebook is asking, is it true that on a hybrid setting or work setup, people or the staff that are working more on a work from home setting will have a different treatment in terms of promotions and relationship building? Okay, this doesn't need to be proven by science, but the fact that you're not always exposed physically to people in the office, it only goes to show that out of sight, out of mind. What do I mean? If you're not spending a lot of time with someone on a daily basis, the friendship isn't going to be tighter. Your ability to crack jokes, your ability to show sympathy that you can talk about your family over lunch does not happen as frequently. And therefore, those relationships, which eventually could be a reason for your likability. And let's face it, guys, some people can get promoted because they're more likable, they're more charming, they believe in their purpose. For example, when these things don't happen because you're mostly working from home, you can't blame the fact that people are going to be more biased and people are going to be more oriented to want to work with people that they spend more time with. In the science of romantic relationships, this falls under proximity and frequency. We tend to fall in love more with people when they are closer to us and they're more accessible to us. We also tend to think that someone over time becomes more good looking just because we get to see them every day. Because our eyes, our brains get used to how they look. Amazing, right? But yes, so work from home settings may not always be to the favor in favor of those working from home simply because the exposure, the physical exposure is not as intense as the ones that are working from. And this is you can Google this. A lot of research has have shown managers are more forgiving when the employee is on site because they get to monitor their behaviors. Managers get to be more paranoid when you're working from home because there's a tendency to think that you're not getting your job done. You're probably watching Netflix or just scrolling through your TikTok. Okay. All right. Let's look at more questions here. Minu is asking from LinkedIn, how do I avoid my boss? How do I manage my boss who keeps on dumping extra work because I'm a top performer? So I just recently posted something about this. This is called the star employee paradox. When you perform so well in your company, the company tends to trust you more, and the company believes that you can absorb more work. So the tendency now is for the company to dump on more work on you. And this is unfair to a certain extent because if you're not being properly compensated for it, it's a creative way for the company to label it as I'm giving you more opportunities. I'm stretching your role. And I love it when the company stretches someone's role because this means that they see the potential in you. But we have to draw the line between am I getting stretched or am I being taken advantage of by a company who refuses to hire more people and instead dumps that additional workload to someone who they think is not going to complain. So, Minu, and probably you have an idea already of what I'm going to say, you have to speak up. You have to have a one on one discussion with your boss and do two things. On your first part of conversation, show first appreciation. Appreciation such as, I appreciate that I am getting all of these opportunities. I'm getting assigned more complex projects, and I'm grateful because it's a sign that you guys are trusting me with my quality of work. And then after you've shown appreciation, the second level of the conversation should be, however, I'd like to negotiate that the additional workload can only be absorbed to a certain point wherein I can still afford to juggle five or seven things at the same time, right? Beyond that, if I absorb additional work such as Project X, Project Y, and Project Z, I will not be able to promise to you, even if I want to, that the same quality of output will be yielded from me. And the reason for that is because, and then you show the reasons why in terms of explaining the workload processes involved. Okay. So this formula is important because you want them to know that you're all out there to support the organization. You're a team player. You're not complaining. What you're simply asking is fairness. What you're also asking is, at the end of the day, if we want the company to succeed, it can only do so if the people who need to accomplish the project are properly resourced. And if they aren't, the projects will also not be accomplished. So your choice of words reflect that you're not just there to speak for yourself. You're there to speak for the what happens to the organization at the end of the day. Okay. Okay. Gretel from LinkedIn is asking. By the way, I noticed that a lot of the questions are coming from LinkedIn. Huh? Gretel's asking, is it true to never trust managers who advise us to say something or his or her doors are open for feedback or complaints? Some say it's a trap. No, I disagree. Whenever I have new employees in my company, I often tell them, if you have any questions, if you have any clarifications, feel free to approach me. I even tell them, on your first 2 weeks or your first month, I'm going to expect that you will make a lot of mistakes. And that's fine. I will keep them as part of your learning curve. However, I need to hold you accountable that after 1 month or 2 months, you need to minimize those questions, because if you're still asking the basic questions, then it means we're not progressing from what you're learning. Okay? So, Gretel, if your manager tells you that at the start of your career, I think it's a sign of a manager who's open to feedback, and also who wants you to know that your progression is a priority in their bucket list. Okay. Okay. Let's look at LinkedIn user says this. What is the best approach to tell someone in charge that I am overworked yet underpaid without sounding pathetic and pointing their incompetence? I think I've already mentioned this a while ago. It's a matter of choosing your words, and also use the formula appreciate and then you challenge. Okay? Okay, my screen is flipped. You appreciate and then you challenge. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the trust. However, and then you share what you need to say. Okay, this one's a long one. Nakila says, in my case, there was an appraisal signed by my boss and our president. However, our company HR manager, calling the HR manager, by the way, is hesitant to process it since we are not close. Ooh. This is just me, but I'm just speaking from my experience. I feel so lucky and fortunate that I've never encountered these people in my life. I will not say that I've never had conflicts with people when I was in the corporate world, but I can say that I was never politicized. Maybe it's because I had great bosses who shielded me, or maybe because I was just good enough to create an aura that you can't mess with me. Okay, so whenever I hear these kinds of stories, I feel bad, because I wish that in 2023, the least of our worries should be politics. We should be worrying more about our deadlines, the quality of our output. Canva is not working because it's down today, right? So those should be the problems you should be irritated with. But never, let's go back. But she cannot fire me since I handle the environment, etc., etc. Should I tell the president the slow processing of the HR regarding my appraisal? Okay, three things. Number one, is there a clear timeline on when it should be processed? Because if there is, then you don't even need to raise this to the president. You can simply call out the team and say, may I ask why that the deadline is supposed to be by April 30, but nothing is yet progressing and it's already May 1, for example. Okay. Number two, I would have a heart-to-heart talk with this HR, but I will not do it one-on-one. I will do it perhaps with a manager or with other witnesses. And in that meeting, ask the reasons why, or ask for, my style would be, is there anything else that I am missing? Is there anything else that is missing from another person's desk? Is there a signature that we are waiting that we can't afford, that we can't secure? Can I help you on that part? Would you like me to be the one to ask that person? So whenever I do these things, and this is part of theater, okay, these are theatrical gestures that you have to do. It sends a message to the other person that I am waiting. I'm starting to get impatient, and you have to do something about this. Okay? Now, if you've exhausted all the two levels, all the two steps, you've asked the person, you've asked the deadline, and they're still not working on it, that's when I will start escalating it to other folks. It doesn't have to be the president. It could be the boss of this HR person. It could be the department head. right? And the reason why I'm saying that is because sometimes escalating it far, way above the position might be seen as if you're a child complaining that your candy was stolen. Maybe, however, in Nakila's case, the president is already the same person that the HR manager is reporting to. So if you have a small company, then go. What I'm recommending here is to go above the position of the HR manager and try to call out why is there uh, slow progress to what's happening. Again, only do this if there is a timeline that was promised. Okay? You might think 3 months is too slow, but the regular amount of time is 6 months. So you're going to be called out impatient. If the average time span to get it done is 3 months and it's already past 3 months, then you have all the rights to call this out. Okay. All right. Let's look for more questions. We're halfway. Trying to read questions that are similar so that I don't need to duplicate. Nikki, is it valid that a BPO company would hold your annual appraisal? When I say annual appraisal, I'm referring to the meeting where you get to have a one-on-one discussion with your manager, by the way, huh? I hope you're referring to that because that's the technical term for it. I hope you're not referring to your annual bonus, commissions, etc. Just because a different client pulled out, which is not even your client at all. Okay? I may need more background information about this, Nikki, but there are two things I'd like you to consider, regardless of what your issue is. Number one, due diligence is always a responsibility of any company. Okay, which means if annual and if in your contract an annual appraisal is always guaranteed and always part of the commitment, the company should follow those rules and stipulations. Number two, consider how other employees are being treated. If everyone is getting their annual appraisal and you're the only one who's not, call this out. Ask the reason why from your manager, ask the reason why from your HR, or ask the reason why from your department heads. Okay? I think it's also ironic that you're not given an appraisal because if there was an issue to begin with, the appraisal would rather be the perfect opportunity to ask why the mistake happened and who's accountable for that mistake. Okay? So ask. I would request you to please don't apply a silent treatment approach. You have to ask. Okay, another LinkedIn user. Okay, people are finally getting my what I'm trying to say here, which is if you don't want your name or your photo to be shown, please hide it. Okay, because I cannot. There is no button for me that if you put it in the chat box, I will not be able to hide it. I just simply click display and it gets shown on the screen. The one here below. Okay, so LinkedIn users here says the job description includes a bullet that says other tasks that may be assigned to you is a red flag. Yes, it is for me because it is not normal that other tasks assigned to you is part of your scope. In any contract, any task is a task assigned to you as a task assigned to you could vary, such as getting someone a cup of coffee, right? Fetching their kids from school. So you have to be very specific. So if you see this in the job interview, ask what exactly it is. Okay. All right. Ooh. Let's look at more questions. Okay, another LinkedIn user. What do you do with a manager who promises a promotion and does not provide you an interim appointment? Okay, not sure if I'm getting this right. This assumes that promotions require a transition. Okay, and I need to tell you, not all the time. Some people can be promoted without them knowing that they are about to get promoted. And some people can get promoted without any 3 months or 6 months. I think what you're trying to refer here is the interim arrangement wherein you are given a team leader position or an OIC position. So in some companies, they test the waters first for 3 months or 6 months. They give you stretch assignments. If you're able to pass the challenges, then the confirmation of your promotion is There, it's achieved. I will say, however, that this isn't the case for most companies. It is a case to case basis. It's a discretion also of the company. So if you don't have an interim appointment, ask two things. Number one, why do you need it? Is this integral to your success? And number two, if you really need it, it doesn't hurt to ask your boss. It doesn't hurt to ask them for a transition project so you can be upskilled so that you're ready to take on that new role after promotion. Okay? All right. By the way, before I continue, because we're halfway, may I just quickly do some commercials? I hope you guys let me share some info. So the first one I'd like to share, wait, is this. I'd like to invite you to our upcoming workshops, and these are happening in the next 2 weeks. We have leadership in hybrid work era, level up your social media marketing, how to manage irate customers, boost your confidence, and also email etiquette and business writing. They're all going to be happening at SMX Convention Center in Fort BGC. Please come. The ticket is worth 1,299 pesos for early birds, and that's ending on April 17. Otherwise, it gets revised to 1,799 for those who pay after April 17. We hope we get to see you. Every month, we do this with about 100 participants per topic, and you also get interaction with a lot of people, people who also talk about leadership, digital marketing, boosting your confidence, or email etiquette as well. So we hope to get to see you. If you're wondering how to register, just go to our website, jonathanyabut.com. Okay, let's go back. Let's answer some of your questions. Am I doing a good job in quickly answering? I hope I'm trying to improve my speed. Usually I would spend 5 to 10 minutes on each question. So I'm trying to minimize it to 3 minutes without doing some impact on the quality of how I answer them. Okay, Son Garcia. John, what are your thoughts on being counter offered with a higher salary just because you mentioned to your boss that you're going to resign? Some say that if they really value you, the increase should have happened already to avoid resignation. Not going to spend too much time on this. I've made a lot of videos about this. My personal take is that if they really value you, it should not take a resignation for them to increase your salary. Okay? That salary increase is basically a payment so that they don't have a harder time looking for your replacement. So it's an inconvenience fee from their end. Eileen, do you have online workshops for people abroad? Yes. It's also in our website. It's an online course, 1.5 hours. It could be about confidence building, business writing, leadership, etc. So jonathanyabut.com. Okay, EJ says, hello, watching from Cebu. We're visiting Cebu, by the way, soon. In June and July, we're still figuring out the dates. We're going to be conducting some workshops with SMX Convention Center in Cebu. Okay, Nikki, is it better to look foolish for clarifying a task? Yes, I don't care. I don't care if you think that I'm stupid. If I am not aware of X, Y, and Z, I will ask it because I want to get it right. That few seconds of embarrassment is way better than a lifetime of regret that you did not ask anything at all. Okay? I'm going to flip the coin. I do think that before you ask a question, you should be mindful if you've done your homework. For example, a lot of you guys, whenever we post something on our Facebook account, we post our online or face-to-face workshops, and there are still people who will ask, how much? Where is it happening? When is it happening? And I'm like, guys, it's in the poster. You're not reading it. Same thing happens in meetings. Please don't ask questions if the answers are so obvious. And it will only reflect that you did not read the email properly or you did not listen to someone else's words. So you have to balance both. Okay? But generally, if you think that something is not clear, please don't hesitate to call it out and ask. It's better to be embarrassed for a few seconds than regretting it for a lifetime that you made a mistake because you didn't clarify it properly. Okay, let's look for more questions here. I think we can cover four to five more questions. Okay, Vincent, how can I influence my teammates to be excellent on what they're doing? How can I encourage them to be their best? This is like a Miss Universe question. There are many ways to answer this. But before you even motivate, so my general answer would be, before you even motivate, consider probing what motivates them. And please don't judge people if they're motivated by something that doesn't motivate you. So for example, some people get motivated by money. And you might say, no, 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 money's not in it for me. I'm after the purpose. I'm after the value. I'm after the ego that I was able to achieve things. Good for you. If money is not your biggest issue because you're rich, probably, don't judge and belittle others who have to work because they have to make a living. If money is what motivates them, then it's the one thing that you can constantly remind them. As a leader, I would motivate them via incentives, via commissions. I would constantly remind them on a weekly basis, sometimes in a joking manner, that meeting your quota could lead to X, Y, and Z. It's an art. If money is the one that motivates them, go to that route. If the one thing that motivates them is purpose, you're doing it because the customers need it, you're doing it because the job is important for the Philippine economy, then whenever you do your huddles, your weekly meetings, make sure you keep on reminding them the purpose behind their jobs. We do a lot of workshops for insurance companies. Tomorrow, we're going to be doing a workshop for Pru Life Insurance. And we often tell insurance companies, it's so easy to take for granted the importance of what you do. But please remember that for every person that signs into an insurance policy, be reminded that you're protecting that person's future, that they get to have a shield, that if something happens to them, they have resources to go back to. And that is something that makes you smile, right? When you wake up in the morning, because not everyone gets to wake up and say, I'm doing a job that makes someone's life protected for future purposes. If that is the one thing that motivates your people, remind them about it from time to time. Okay? All right. Let's look more at more questions here. Grace is asking, how can we promote accountability and responsibility when role modeling does not seem to work? There are many reasons why role modeling does not work. Number one, it usually is perceived to be favoritism. If you keep on saying, "Oh, look at Brian. Look at how he talks to the customer. See, I want you to also talk to them the way he does." And in the eyes of the person being told to, they will think, you always keep on mentioning Brian because Brian is your favorite employee. Because Brian's the best and I'm the black sheep. So rather than making this person feel inspired, they get further demotivated. So just to answer this first part of the question, when you're using role modeling technique, do not only use one person as the role model. As much as you can, spread it across the organization. Use different types of people. Okay? And sometimes, don't just use role modeling for positive reinforcement. Use it also for negative feedback. So, for example, when you want to point out how it's done wrong, then you can call out another person. Oh, did you see how Sheila did it? Between the two of us, Sheila is a nice person, but I am not a big fan of how she talks to the customers because in many situations, it offends the customer. And then you explain X, Y, and Z. That's still role modeling. So role modeling doesn't have to be positive all the time. It can also be a way of showing what they have to be avoiding. Okay? So to answer your question directly now, how do we promote accountability and responsibility when role modeling does not seem to work? Look at other routes, incentives, penalties, which I would always do work hand in hand. Sometimes people just don't follow the rules because they don't think that they should be emulating another person. They're rather more inward looking. I'm going to do this because it's what's good for me or what's good for my family. If that is the language that they want to work on, go for that route. So I would go for incentives. I would go for penalties to promote their accountability. Okay. Another way also is Again, I want to talk about the role modeling part. One way to make role modeling effective is when you have established penalties for employee X, it sends a message to other employees that if you do the same thing, you'll also face the same consequences. So that's also an effective way to use role modeling using a constructive route. Okay. Oh, and last one. People will not appreciate accountability. Let me just fix, by the way, my laptop. There you go. People will not appreciate accountability if they don't see it from their leaders. So the moment someone sees that everything is all about just cheap talk, but they don't see their managers and leaders doing the same thing, then the credibility falls. There's no reason for me to follow and do the same thing. Okay, Kate or Kate, not sure how to pronounce this. Hi, Jonathan. How do you deal with a boss who has poor EQ and doesn't take responsibility of how their actions affect your performance at work? Result of this is a high turnover rate of other team members. I'm gonna make a deep sigh because this is something that I often see at work. So two things. One, my favorite, heart to heart talk again, confront with your manager. But then again, this manager seems to be the type who's not open to these types of conversations. So I would go for the second route. Consider talking to the manager of the boss, or consider talking to a person who is of the same level with your boss. It could be a manager from another department, it could be a vice president from another team. Okay? And rather than saying it in a way that you're complaining, be consultative with your approach and say something like, Anna, I'd like to ask you a question about my boss. I've noticed that whenever I do X, Y, and Z, he seems to respond by doing A, B, and C. You've worked with him for 5 years at least. Could you give me some tips on how I can manage that reaction from him? Okay? So be consultative. I also need to raise this. Be very selective with the people you talk to in the company because you don't want to look like you're telling on your boss to someone else. Okay? And it might look like you're sneaking behind their back. So be careful and be choosy with people that you can trust. Okay? The third approach I would love you to do is rather than doing a heart to heart one on one talk, huddle the manager rather as a team. And the reason why this works is because you want to show to the manager that it's not only one person who has an issue, it's multiple people. So volume increases the credibility. There is a downside, however, to this, and that is the manager might think that you're ganging up on them because everyone suddenly just wants to share their issues. So it's gonna sound like it's a retreat. You know, how a retreat we're in, you share your issues with someone, and then everyone just shares their issue with the same person. Might not work out right. Okay, so weigh the pros and cons. Zachary says, how do you respond or deal with a boss who underappreciates you but appreciates others who don't even work with him directly? I assume that the reason why you're saying this is because you've observed this many times. So before you even approach your manager, I want you to have proof. Lots and lots of proofs. List it down, record it as much as you can. So when you approach them, say something like, may I ask uh, boss or what however you call your boss, I notice that whenever I accomplish X, Y, and Z, I don't hear a word from you, and I wish that you do because it makes me feel appreciated and it makes me more inspired with my job. However, also I've noticed that when someone else from another team does it, I notice that you rather recognize them. And then that's where you share your proof. For example, last Tuesday, I noticed that when we had a meeting and Clara did this, you said X, Y, and Z. So these things are important, by the way, because when you have anecdotes and proof, it's going to be hard to be disputed. And you don't want your manager to think that you're inventing and making up all of these things. Okay? And then when you share it and say it, I wish, boss, how I wish if I can have the same treatment as well as you do with Clara. Because it's the type of gesture that makes me feel appreciated. I'm the type of person whose love language is words of affirmation. Okay? The one thing I want you to avoid is to make it look like you're, you know how some children complain to their parents that one of their sibling is getting the bigger portion of the hot dog, or one of their sibling is getting a more expensive toy. So I want you to avoid having that tone. Okay? So the approach must be consultative and anecdote driven, proof driven. Okay, Webster, good afternoon. How do I tell my supervisor that sometimes I cannot say no to some requests of other departments due to urgency, but in my point of view, it may somehow deviate company's policy? I'm from finance department. Okay, two things. The fact that your supervisor is asking you to reject a project request, it probably is because it's for your own good. It probably is because you're doing things that are unnecessary to your metrics and unnecessary to what's good for the company. So if you're telling me that you can't say no, there must be a compelling reason why. So my request to you, Webster, is have you properly explained to your manager why you cannot say no? So you can say something like, Boss, I understand. We got other things to do. I totally understand. There are other deadlines to beat. But could you please hear me out? I have to say yes to this because if I don't do this now, X, Y, and Z. And sometimes explaining the why changes how they perceive you. Because our bosses are not omniscient, they're not omnipotent. They're not all knowing. They're also human beings. There will be things that they don't know. And sometimes we automatically assume that they know everything. They don't. So take the time to explain it to them. Okay? In my point of view, it may somehow deviate company's policy. If it does, tell it to your boss. Your boss is going to be your number one supporter. You also owe it to your boss because if you did something that's against the company's policy, it's not going to be only you who will be held accountable, it's also going to be your boss. So don't be selfish, be transparent. Whatever you're doing, align it with your manager also. Okay? It's going to be the reason why your relationship might be in the rocks if you're hiding something from them. Okay? Lizelle says, thank you. Learned so much from this live. Thank you. I hope the rest of our participants do the same thing too. Zachary says, appreciate it a lot. Exactly, it's my love language, words of affirmation. Okay, can we chase this last question or maybe two? Let's see. Claudine is asking, how do you deal with a boss that doesn't honor my opinion towards leading my subordinates? My subordinates talk to her directly and she agrees immediately without consulting me. Ooh, so there's your classic question of what do I do if my manager bypasses me? And so it makes me a middleman, but it makes me a rubber stamp. Excuse me, a rubber stamp manager. Okay, two things. Number one, try to investigate what's the reason why your people have a tendency to skip you. Is it because they think that they're getting better advice? Or is it because they think that the process becomes faster if they skip you and they go straight to the manager? Okay? You have to explore this portion first because maybe the reason could be you. It's maybe because something happened in the past that it made them feel that you became an extra step. It burdens the project and makes things slower. So the solution is how can you prove to them and win them back, win their trust that even if you're an added layer, things are going to progress quickly also. That's one. The second thing I would do is I would talk to my manager and I would say, I appreciate that projects will proceed faster if my people are able to go straight to you. But may I request that for certain projects, I will need to be the one to approve them first. And then you explain why. My explanations would be I need this as part of my developmental growth. To become a better manager, I need to interact with my people more. And so I'm asking you, if you could please give me that exposure for my people, right? And number two, you can also, I will explain it to my boss and say, I need a level of command. If my people keep on skipping me in these projects, I will lose my credibility and I will lose their respect, which in the end might affect the future projects. And we don't want that to happen for the entire organization. So I need to be the one approving the projects instead. What I will promise, however, is that even if I'm an added layer, this should not affect the speed and the quality of the projects. So again, heart to heart talk. The third thing I'd like you to consider is, have you talked to your subordinates? Have you talked to your team members? Have you imposed, I'm going to use that word, that there has to be a guideline where in team, I understand that we have a tendency to go straight to Mr. X, Y, and Z, to Mrs. Santos X, Y, and Z. But I appreciate that you first go to me first so that, and here's the reason I will give. I will tell them when we present our ideas to them, the ideas are not going to be half baked. The ideas can also benefit from the additional input that I can give to you, which makes our department look better because it only shows that we are prepared before we engage other stakeholders. Okay? Okay, last question. This one's an easy, that's why I'm going to raise it. Raymond's asking, what do I say to my boss that I wish to go on leave because I want to pursue further studies for my career advancement? There's no other way of doing it but saying it. But before you say it, consider what are the options in your company. Are you able to take sabbatical leave? Are you able to have a commitment that even if you leave, you will still keep your job? Okay. Or number three, try to negotiate. Can you do a part-time job and part-time study? I would rather go for that route because most of the time, and this is proven by a lot of research, people who take a sabbatical leave have a harder time getting back to work, or the position has significantly changed that over time you don't like your job anymore, or the dynamics of the company has changed that it makes you want to quit and look for greener pastures. Okay? So consider options. Don't look at the situation as if it's a yes or no. It's the situation is more of, can I get this and this at the same time? Can I balance or can I get 50-50? That's also an option you can take. Okay? All right. I hope you guys are learning something so far. May I request an exclamation mark if our participants are learning something, whether you're on LinkedIn, you're on YouTube, or you're on Facebook? Do not forget, by the way, this is just part one. We're going to have the same topic on Friday. Same time, 5 o'clock p.m. Same questions. What to do when you're getting dumped with too much workload. So if you can, send your questions in advance. You can send me an email, jonathanyabut@jycbasia.com, so I can reserve the time for your questions. Okay? All right. And with that, I'm going to end this session. I'm going to leave you behind with our commercials. We have an ongoing 50% sale on Lazada and Shopee for our best-selling books. You can go to Lazada and Shopee and type official Jonathan Yabut store, and it's available until April 15. Okay, just in time for salary payday on, it's going to be on Friday or Monday. Some people will get it on Friday. Okay. And then last, if you are up for more learning and you can't attend our on-site workshops, you can do that instead. So you see this? These are our courses that are recorded, which you can watch anytime and anywhere. And the tickets are only 499 pesos as well. 1.5 hours that are for fun-filled learning, okay, about your career management. Okay? All right. I hope I get to see you on Friday, same time here on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We're going to fix our TikTok, by the way, so we can have it live because I wasn't able to do it this afternoon. I hope you had a well-rested Holy Week last week. Do well and stay safe. Bye, guys.